always wanted to do that. Okay, I think we're all set. So, hello to anyone watching. I was looking around to see if there was a video sort of like this, and I didn't really see much that come on, so I put together stuff from things that I've researched in the past, things that I've learned on courses I've done, and put together this as a brief history into prosthetics and special effects in film. Okay, so for reference, I've been really interested in this subject since I was 13, 14, I'm now nearly 21, so that's a good 7-ish years. I did a big project on it. In England it's called an EPQ, which means an extended project qualification, so you kind of get, as it says in the title, qualification at the end. I've done a few courses on them, some shorter, some longer. One where I did a 1-year course in it and got a qualification at the end, and I also got an award for prosthetics. Promise I'm very good. So anyway, that's a little bit about me, but bear in mind that I am still in a trainee position. I'm not been someone who's been working in this industry for a very long time. I'm actually still trying to break out into it. Just bear that in mind while I talk about this. But anyway, for anyone interested, here's a brief history in special effects in film. Right, so I figured we just sort of start off with the basics of what is special effects. Special effects makeup, also known as SFX makeup, is the term used for when you use projects or cosmetics to create an effect in media, usually film, TV, theatre and the like, and it can be something as small as a bruise or a small cut to a full transformation, including like an alien or a mythical creature. You also may hear people refer to prosthetic makeup or prosthetics in this sort of area. It is not referring to fake limbs used for amputees. Prosthetics in this definition actually refers to when you have a prosthetic piece or appliance, which is something is applied directly onto the skin in order to create a bigger effect. These sort of special effects makeup comes under the bigger umbrella term of special effects, which is usually differs from visual effects, as special effects is known as a practical effect, aka something that is created in the flesh for when you're shooting something, whereas visual effects typically is a computer-generated one that is added in post. So when the cinema really started at the end of the 19th century, it borrowed really heavily from its predecessor, theatre and opera. Theatre was known for having really extreme makeup, which makes sense because the audience is about 500 miles away and they couldn't really see specific details, so the makeup needed to be a little bit more exaggerated and dramatic for them to pick up on it. Also, opera was known for using some pretty gnarly masks. I'll see if I can find a link. The most common product used at this time was grease paint, infamous for being, well, greasy. Actors would pair it with a really heavy powder that would stop it from melting off their face about 20 minutes into their show. Makeup was also pretty important to this part of cinema because spoken dialogue didn't come until the late 20s, so during this 30-year period, everyone really did need to rely on their makeup to also help tell the story with their facial expressions. The makeup during this earlier part of the period also was very influenced by theatre in terms of it was also pretty brash. As it moved into the 20s, it became a little more sophisticated and a little less in your face. I also thought it was important to mention that during this time, film used was usually known as being blue sensitive, which meant that blues and violets, when it was being filmed, picked up and translated to being very light grey or white, and it was also then making yellows and reds seem very dark or black. This was also an issue considering a lot of the flesh pigments contain lots of yellow and red, not blue. Unmade-up faces with an uneven complexion then just registered as being mucky on camera. This led to a lot more directors choosing actors on their physical appearance and how smooth their skin complexion was over their acting ability, leading to the beginning of typecasting, which we still kind of see today. Special effects in film really did start to kick off with silent movie star Lon Chaney, who was known for starring in The Hunchback of Notre Dame from 1923 and Phantom of the Opera in 1925. He was also particularly known for doing his own makeup and earned the reputation of being a man with 1,000 faces. With limited products during this time, a surgical dressing known as collodion seemed to be pretty popular, and fun fact, is still a product used to this day. Chaney also was known for going quite extreme with his transformations, including putting wire up his nose, please don't do this, and egg whites in his eyes, please don't do this. But truly, a DIY king. SFX makeup was usually pretty prominent in the horror genre, with Universal following up the 20s by going absolutely crazy, releasing many horror films from the 30s to the 40s. This included releases such as Frankenstein, 1931, The Mummy, 1932, and Dracula, 1933. The Dark Universe, remember that they tried to do? Yeah, this is what it was based on. This is what they tried to do. A prominent SFX makeup artist during this time was Jack Pierce. He's pretty well known for creating some of the more iconic characters in the horror genre, with Universal especially, and he's very well known for doing his Frankenstein's monster look. I called it Frankenstein's monster, I don't want anyone coming after me. A popular method of the time to add to the parts of the body, including Frankenstein monster's very big noggin, was to use layers of the collodion and cotton and to build it up slowly to get the created effect. This is actually a method that you can still see around today, just with different products, and is mostly used online with special effects makeup artists on social media, such as creating looks with latex and tissue. For some creature creations, a full mask was used. In the late 1930s, they also came up with making their first appliances, which would be able to be attached to the skin and then detached very quickly. It was a lot quicker than to building up your character layer by layer by layer, and it did prove to be popular, as again, it is a still method used today. You can see examples of this in The Wizard of Oz, as with the Wicked Witch of the West and the Tin Man. Moving on to the 50s with this one, horror tended to take a bit more of a backseat, as sci-fi really blossomed in the mainstream and pumped out a lot of feature films during this period. This is where we tended to see a lot more weird and wonderful wacky creatures starting to be created. This is where we also needed a bit more of a full body transformation opposed to just some makeup put on the face area. As you needed to transform the actor's whole body, it became quite popular to use a whole rubber suit on the actor, which you then paired with a mask. These two paired together then helped cover the large area. Again, this is a method we do still see today, just with slightly different materials and slightly different execution, as you can see from Creature of the Black Lagoon in 1954 versus The Shape of Water from 2018? Horror did start to see a bit more of a resurgence as we entered the 60s, most notable the UK production Hammer House, which released a lot of Hammer House horror, but these did use quite a lot of similar tricks. I would say SFX started to advance with another sci-fi, The Planet of the Apes from 1966. On it, makeup artist John Chambers, former facial reconstruction surgeon, that was his life before makeup. He created a bunch of different new materials, including one that was used on Planet of the Apes. This was one he created because he wanted to get the full movement of the actors' faces, as well as be able to make them be less constricting and a little bit more durable and wearable throughout a long day of shooting. This was known as foam latex, which was known for being very breathable, as well as letting moisture pass through it, so it was allowed to be worn for longer periods of shooting. Aside from this one in the 60s, I would really then say that the next development came in the horror film The Exorcist from 1973. On this project we had makeup artist Dick Smith working, where he was also known for really changing how appliances were applied, if that makes sense. Basically, how appliances were usually applied before is that you had larger pieces or a full mask, but because they were so big, they tended to warp before they were applied. This would mean that it would be pretty ill-fitting and a bit saggy. This, again, isn't really the end of the world. You can get around warping like that. You do still see it with appliances made today. They can still warp. It's just something that might happen. It was really time-consuming to fix, and time on set is everything. You need as much of it as you can get, and you want things to be as quick as possible. What he really proposed was that for one look to make more smaller appliances and then layer them with each other, rather than larger pieces which had a chance to warp. As the pieces are smaller, there is a less chance of them stretching and becoming ill-fitting. The layering technique also seemed to be very popular, as it is in fact a technique still used to this day. Dick Smith was also really well known for his aging makeup, as seen with Marlon Brando in The Godfather. He didn't actually even use any prosthetics. Marlon Brando thought they would take too long to apply and didn't want to sit that long, so he just painted it all on. He also aged up a priest in The Exorcist, and then finally well known for his work on Amadeus in 1984. This leads us to my personal favourite decade, which is the 80s. Kicking off this decade, we have David Lynch with The Elephant Man in 1980, which is based off a real man who was born in the late 1800s, born with many body disfigurement. Lynch had actually planned to do the makeup himself, but then a week before they started shooting, I guess he remembered he wasn't a makeup artist, so they brought Christopher Tucker on, an actual SFX makeup artist, who then also, fun fact, he did the original makeup for Phantom of the Opera by Andrew Lloyd Webber, that one. He also then came back and did the 2011. I really like Phantom of the Opera. The makeup in this film is actually honestly one of the best designed I've ever seen and one of the most complex. They also did research by taking a cast of the actual skeleton of the man the story is based off. At this moment in time, it's also worth mentioning that the Oscars didn't have a makeup award for some reason, although they used to have an award for the best text. Slides. There had been a lot of campaigning over the years by several people as well as several organisations to try and get an award introduced. It was actually The Elephant Man, where the Academy received a lot of complaints that there wasn't any award for the makeup in there, so they introduced the category the next year in 1981. So even though The Elephant Man didn't end up winning an award for its makeup, it is the film that made that category exist. The first award was then won by Rick Baker for his work on An American Werewolf in London by John Landis. This film has everything. Anything you could want for liking special effects, this film has. Wound/injury makeup, zombie/living dead makeup, bug monster makeup, animatronics, and also probably the most famous transformation scene ever. During this scene, it combined fake body parts with the animatronics to make it seem like the body was stretching and elongating as it transformed into a werewolf. There was reverse camera work where someone pulled hair through fake skin and then played it back in reverse to make it look like hair was growing. Just like everything that makes special effects great was just put into a blender and then turned up to 11. It's fantastic. Honestly, it's really good. Makeup artist here, Rick Baker, is also arguably one of the most recognisable special effects makeup artists ever, as his work includes work on Gremlins, Men in Black, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and Michael Jackson's Thriller. Quickly nipping back to the 80s as a generalisation for the special effects during this era, it was pretty well known for being a little bit over the top, really colourful, and pretty full on and explicit. In my opinion, it does kind of mirror the makeup trends of the time of being bigger is better, more is more, and colour everything. There is so much colour during this period, it's insane. It is seen as generally being a great decade for special effects and practical effects because CGI was still not really fully developed enough to use in excess. We'll get to CGI in a moment. This era did truly bring us some iconic characters, including the alien from The Thing. By the way, just wanted to mention the 21-year-old artist who worked on this film, Rob Bottin, was then hospitalised for exhaustion after working on it, and if you see the effects, you can probably see why. It took a lot of work. We can't forget having Freddy Krueger, makeup done by Robert Kurtzman in Nightmare on Elm Street in 1984. There was also David Cronenberg's very weird adaptation of The Fly in 1986, where Chris Wallace nabbed an Academy Award for his work on it. I also just wanted to have a quick shout out to Scanners in 1981 with our boy Dick Smith for a really good exploding headshot. I'll see if I can find a picture and put it in. If not, just go and search it. It is a really good effect. Trust me. It's quality. As we now nip onto the 90s, the practical effects of this time also mirrored the sort of mainstream makeup trends of being a lot more pulled back and a lot more neutral and a little bit more sophisticated in response to the very loud and expressive and brass version of makeup in the 80s. The style was more subdued and a little bit more realistic, where we can see in works such as Silence of the Lambs from 1994, from Scream 1996 and The Blair Witch Project 1999. The horror genre at this time liked to rely on the directing, on the tone, on the building of suspension in order to relay its horror to its viewers. There is also a notable breakthrough for the special effects during this period by Gordon Smith, who introduced a new product onto the scene: silicone. People had been messing around with this product prior to Gordon Smith's version breaking through. It was really his experimentation and his technique that allowed it to be such a widespread and popular material. It is also, again to my knowledge, the most popular product in prosthetics and special effects in the industry today. I am currently working on a video where I talk about different products used in the industry today, and I'll probably do a separate video dedicated solely to silicone, just because there is so much to cover in it. But if that's something you're interested, I highly recommend you then hit subscribe and just keep an eye out for it, as I'm sure it'll be coming within the next month or so. We're now leading on from the 90s to the 2000s, and lads, we are on the home stretch. We are nearly at the end. During this time, there had been lots of breakthroughs for CGI and VFX, so a lot of film production companies were turning to the computer-generated effects over practical effects. So, how well did it go? Well, it sure did happen. I think we'll leave it at that, really. Luckily, for everyone's sake, they calmed right down with the VFX over practical effects, and practical effects started coming back in a really big way. I also just want to mention this isn't meant to bash on CGI or visual effects or anything. I think the work coming out of the industry today is phenomenal. You can barely tell the difference in a background if it's been computer generated or if it's real. I just mean for at the time they were a little bit too eager and a little bit too excited, and they just went insane. Anything they could computer generate, they did. We remember Ryan Reynolds. I won't forget. Usually what the technique is nowadays is that you will pair practical effects with the VFX. No fighting, the two will combine together. And this is actually what I've heard a lot of professionals talking about and saying how great it is. I think during the time of the great influx of CGI in the film industry, a lot of people thought that practical effects would be got out of a job, there'd be no more special effects makeup artists. But actually, as time has progressed on, a lot of special effects makeup artists reckon it's a great time to be doing what you do now. I think a lot of special effects artists have mentioned how great it is that the two are working together. I remember one guy saying that the VFX just took away the really hard part of the special effects, which meant you could be really creative and let the VFX take care of the really heavy lifting. I think this method truly seems to be working the best out of everything so far, as you do get the best of both worlds, where you get the tangible and realistic effects from the practical side, and the VFX does things that the practical effects just aren't able to do on their own. I think the best way to show this is to bring up a couple pictures from Game of Thrones. There is extensive makeup covering this whole actor. Where the green parts are on his costume is where it will be digitally removed in special effects, making it appear as though the body has actual chunks missing, which just wouldn't be physically possible to achieve with practical effects alone. So that being said, this pretty much brings us up to date with what special effects would be doing now. So the question is really, what's next for it? My best guess, as well as my best hope, is that there will be advancements in making products more environmentally friendly, so either ones that are more biodegradable or ones that are reusable, as the options are very limited on the market at the moment, and there's not many options being used in productions either. This isn't to say, however, that there aren't any in developments at the moment, there's just not as many to my knowledge. Anyway, this turned out far longer than I thought it would, but I hope to cover some of the most important beats that I thought have happened in the 100+ year history of special effects. I wanted to cover some of the most important and the most influential pieces you'll see in special effects. Again, I haven't been able to cover everything that's happened in special effects, but I hoped I brought a little bit more clarity over a brief introduction to the 100+ year old history of special effects. All links for where I double checked all the information I've been explaining in this episode will be linked down below, and I highly do recommend you check them all out if you are really interested and you want to learn a bit more about special effects history as well. If you do have any questions or anything else you'd like to know about, do feel free to leave a comment. That being said, that is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed, I hope you got some information out of it, and take care. Bye. Freddy Krueger from Nightmare Before Christmas. Nightmare Before Christmas!